Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by Sarah Vocations Ministry. Learn more at joinserra.org.
Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Welcome to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. I'm Jean Till, and on today's show, our guest is John Torpy. He's the producer of The Pope's Visit to Iowa, commemorating the 45th anniversary of Pope John Paul II's visit here to Iowa.
And Jean, were you there that day or in spirit?
Bishop, I'm embarrassed to say, I'll go the next time he comes.
Not knowing, right?
Not knowing,
young, he always passes through Iowa,
that's right,
on his way to other places.
I
was almost like that, so quite honestly, as a 19-year-old at Iowa State. So, but anyway, what a week of grace it has been, and obviously today, Christ Our Life conference going on at the Wells Fargo Arena, the 9 a.m. Mass. I'm privileged to celebrate, but what a roster of speakers, Father Spitzer, Father Monsignor Rossetti, Sister Josephine Garrett, whom we had on the show. So grateful for our partnership also with the Spirit Catholic Radio, who's sharing some of the sponsorship with Iowa Catholic Radio, and so wonderful things. Also, 2 ordinations of bishops this week. Right. Obviously, we had Father Bullock, now Bishop Bullock of Rapid City on Monday, and yesterday, now Bishop Dennis Walsh of Davenport. So what a wonderful, at the Sacred Heart Cathedral there in Davenport, priest of the Diocese of Toledo, but now a priest and bishop of the Diocese of Davenport. So bishops from the Midwest converged. Obviously, his bishop, Dan Thomas of Toledo, preached at the Vesper service. So we're getting there. Now we have a full complement of bishops again, although we know Bishop Nicholas is waiting for that acceptance of the Holy Father so that he can move on as well. But
and you had your 5th anniversary of being our bishop.
Well, I would, it's always going to be easy to remember Bishop Walsh's anniversary 5 years ago. And so we reflected on that sun-drenched day, a day of great grace. Before the pandemic. And so I think, so many got to experience it at St. Francis of Assisi. As we go with John Torpy and talk about some of the behind-the-scenes preparations that led to the post-visit, but on a much smaller scale, all that had to happen for the Diocese of Des Moines for the first time in 70 years or more. So what a blessing, and giving thanks to God on the Feast of St. Vincent de Paul, also our St. Vincent de Paul 100th anniversary. Yes. So we got centennials happening all over a few weeks, Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Des Moines. So a lot of history happening even in our midst. Looking forward to being with our priests from the Diocese of Des Moines next week. We rotate locations each year for our priest workshop, and we'll be in the holy city of Ames next week. It's kind of weird staying in a hotel in Ames, where I grew up.
It's home.
Anyway, but we'll pop in and see Mom there as well. But Father Benjamin Roberts of the Diocese of Charleston, South Carolina, will be guiding us for the first 2 days, reflecting on Catholic social teaching and the role in our preaching and the role in connecting it with the Eucharist, considering also that this is an election year. And so kind of guiding us in that. And then we'll have the good folks from the Divine Renovation team, evangelization, and kind of on the priestly level, how in the spirituality of the priest and the ministry, always striving to have that outward orientation. We can easily get into maintenance mode, but people on a mission. So the very message that you heard at the Eucharistic Congress, Jean, where we were together, sharing so much of that was the particular graces that we're showering forth in this way. So then, let's sprinkle a little Holy Spirit then too at Sacred Heart on Sunday tomorrow. Get a chance to have 2 waves of confirmations before we head off to that priest workshop, and then St. Teresa of the Child Jesus, the little flower.
That's right.
How can you not love her?
That's right.
I mean, so on October 1st, of course, her great feast day. Kind of looking and reflecting again on Conrad de Meester's book on the message. And just as we kind of wind down this first segment, we always think of Sister Faustina as the kind of a saint of divine mercy. But Therese saw everything swimming in an ocean of divine mercy. Her life is the object of a great mystery, but she called on St. Paul in Romans 9, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. It's not a question of human will or human effort, but of divine mercy. And so she found herself to be a recipient, and how she radiated that love of God in that beautiful way. And so, obviously, as we think about St. John Paul, as his visit to Iowa, and Sister St. Faustina, really the apple of his eye. But I think up in heaven, Faustina and Therese are just basking in each other's presence.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll visit with John Torpy, the producer of the Pope's visit to Iowa, commemorating the 45th anniversary of Pope John Paul II's visit to Iowa in October of '79. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network. Welcome back to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. And on today's show, we are visiting with John Torpy, producer of The Pope's Visit to Iowa, commemorating the 45th anniversary of Pope John Paul II's visit to Iowa. Great documentary.
And when is that going to appear, Gina? And you're kind of doing this one-handed as you've had shoulder surgery. So I'm impressed with your agility here.
Well, it's my left hand, so it can be just over here hanging out, right?
Okay.
It's going to be October 7th, folks. So mark your calendar, October 7th at 8 p.m. on Iowa Public Television.
Monday night, yeah. People have had their fill of football. This is what you need to be watching.
Right.
So it'll be great. So, Mr. Torpy, so pleased to have you. We've made our acquaintance here in the studio, and thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk about this because it's been probably the highlight of my career. It's been one of the best projects to be a part of.
Well,
that's cool.
And that kind of landmark moment in the history of the Diocese of Des Moines, the history of the state of Iowa. When I first became bishop 5 years ago, we were privileged to have Monsignor Bagnano and Monsignor Steve Orr on the show. That was one of my first appearances on Making It Personal. So they graced us in this. So people might say, well, okay, are we just revisiting history? But this documentary is something new. This is something that is fresh.
Yeah, there's a lot more to this than just the anniversary of the Holy Father's visit, which is awesome in its own right. It's a documentary that's built on a documentary. A filmmaker named Marty Joensen had been commissioned by the Catholic Diocese in 1979 to do a behind-the-scenes half-hour film on all the preparation, all the work, all the people that have come together to make this happen. And so Marty came to Iowa PBS with this film asking us, do you guys want this to be able to preserve it, to be able to use it? And we jumped at the opportunity. And the film was processed in Pennsylvania, cleaned up, preserved, and then our general manager tasked me with the project, okay, take this half-hour film and now make it an hour-long film for the 45th anniversary. Mm-hmm. And it was off to the races after that.
Wow, tremendous. And, your background, you're a filmmaker and produce other films and documentaries. What would be some of your repertoire?
I am in my 25th or 24th year at Iowa PBS, and I've worked on Market to Market. I've worked on quilting shows. I've worked on symphonies. It's such a
cultural guy here.
It's a rich learning environment, but that's what it's all about. It's about educating, and it's the power that I get to go learn everything I can about any subject and then turn it into a show. But more importantly, it also gets turned into educational opportunities. My weather documentaries that I've done for Market to Market on storms and flooding and drought, all of that now goes to the educators who break that down into modules and then give it to teachers, and it goes nationwide. And that's pretty powerful. It's pushing a lot of good out the door, and it's so rewarding. But this project about the Pope's visit has been so much more.
So we don't call you professor, but you really are teaching the teachers, and an educator at heart. You kind of see that as your vocational speaking as well. So, and there's mention of the weather more than once in the documentary, as people will see, because that was so critical. This was going to be the only outdoor venue that the Pope appeared in that visit in 1979 to the United States, Boston, New York, Chicago, and then here we are, in Des Moines. So, right.
And the weather is so cooperative in Iowa.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Exactly.
I saw a great mention the other day when it went from 90 degrees to 70 degrees. And somebody had said, it's like Mother Nature saw a state trooper and just put the brakes on and gave us the 70-degree days. But in the documentary, Monsignor Bagnano has a great line about the weather because everybody was so concerned about it. Mm-hmm. But he talked about how they had people praying every day, 2 weeks ahead of time, praying for the weather.
Mobilize the parishes. And yeah.
In this program, now I was 6 years old when he was here, and I remember it, and the filmmaker remembers it, and David Oman remembers it, and everybody that I interviewed remembered when that helicopter, when you heard those rotors, all of a sudden, clouds got out of the way, and it was sunny and warm, and Monsignor Bagnano talks about how when they left the Irish settlement of St. Patrick, it was still overcast and cloudy, but by the time they got to Living History Farm, all of a sudden it was sunny, just bright and warm, And it was miraculous. It was incredible.
And can I get a witness? Because I, too, witnessed that as a 19-year-old young man who was down from Iowa State that day. So 6 years old. Was your family inspired to come?
One of my cousins who was at Clark at the time was singing in the choir.
Clark University?
Yes.
Clark College in those days.
Clark College at the time.
In Dubuque.
Clark University now. And a lot of family came in, anchored at our house. We live on 26th Street in West Des Moines. And then all made the drive to 86 and Hickman, and then everybody made the pilgrimage down Hickman Road and emptied out the golf bags to put sandwiches and drinks and all of that. And my siblings brought homework, and I think there was a football involved at one point. Yeah.
You mentioned Irish settlement, and of course your own Irish lineage and the things that are there. So that may be plucking your own heartstrings as well. But how beautifully, the personality of Farmer Joe Hayes, who extended the invitation of the Holy Father in the first place, comes to life. And what a delightful fellow he was. He passed a couple years ago, still a member of St. Patrick's Irish Settlement when he went to God. But as you get to know him, and you really did well in kind of showing us a profile of Farmer Joe Hayes.
And I wish I could have included more. I interviewed him in 2004 as well, and he was still just as charming as he was in the documentary. And he just cared so much for his community and the role of the church in his own life, in his community, and how it was spread throughout. And he really felt having the Holy Father come was going to just anchor that rural essence, that beauty of what rural life is like for the Holy Father's visit.
Yeah, long before Pope Francis and Laudato Si, praise and care of God's creation and all that. But that really was the message, and Joe Hayes was prophetic in really bringing that forward in such a compelling way. Again, your Irish roots, you mentioned, all the way from Imogene to the Mississippi River, the folks that are there. So obviously the oldest parish in the Diocese of Des Moines and that community of faith, which the Pope affirms so much in his remarks. Talk about the process for you. I mean, do you kind of have a method, or, does each new work, each new endeavor call forth new kind of creativity and reflection?
Each project does carry its own essence, its own meaning. And for this one, it was a moment of, okay, this is full circle for me. I actually know this story. It's not just a historical, I'm doing a documentary about Abraham Lincoln, or it's a Ken Burns, event on the American Revolution. I was there. And how can my experiences and my memories help me get this right? Because there's 350,000 people there. Now there's how many more people that are going to be able to watch this? How do I take what we all know was that feeling and be able to put it in people's living rooms to translate and help them understand how much of a powerful moment that was? And it's a daunting task.
I was going to ask you, a little trepidation with this? You're being entrusted with something.
It's not an easy lift at all, but it's something that the viewers of Iowa PBS have trusted me with for quite a while. And I take that very seriously, and I'm pretty honored to be able to do that. It's, on Market to Market, the agribusiness show, every Friday it's like taking a master's class in agribusiness. And you got to get it right, because there are people that watch that show that make $10,000 decisions every 20 minutes. And people trust us, and to be entrusted with that is huge. Absolutely huge.
So, the 45th anniversary approaching, and, some fresh interviews that you did and everything else, but this is not something, Joe Hayes has passed on. We're not going to have the opportunity to interview people who are part of the actual, experience that was there. So, did you find anybody who was a little reluctant and say, "Oh no, that's ancient history," or were people primed to engage?
That wasn't. I never ran into that once. And what I thought was funny is in some of the interviews, especially with General Thompson, who was in charge of logistics, he had talked about, he called people all around the city for help, traffic directors. He needed companies to do this and do that. Not once was he turned down. Throughout this project, every time I've needed something or I just needed anything or talking to anybody, they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a moment in the documentary where they talk about things being providential. Mm-hmm. This project has had its own providential moments. My wife and I like to support thrift stores, and we were at Mini Hands on Merle Hay, and we were checking out, and right next to the register, there was this glass case that had all these just folders full of newspapers, and my wife just happened to see out of the corner of her eye one little arc, and it turned out to be the stamp of the seal of Pope John Paul II, and she asked to look at it. And sure enough, she opened it up, and it was the October 5th, 1979 Des Moines Register with all the pictures that I needed for my documentary. And it was, so the whole process of this has been filled with moments like that. And it was a pretty, oh, okay, thank you moment. You know?
So and the wonderful way in which you incorporate those pictures, the kind of the clotheslines, if you will, with the photos in the Living History Farms chapel. There, I thought, I haven't been to that chapel in recent times, and is that there part of the display, or that was for you specifically for the documentary?
I put that together specifically. That was another providential moment. I had worked closely with Living History Farms to record the interviews there, and we're doing a preview there, and we had talked to them about using some of their photos, getting into their archives, and they were gracious. They let us have everything, and it was pretty good. It wasn't until a couple weeks into the project that I got a call from their historian that said, hey, this family came by and they just dropped off this photo album. And
what?
This guy was like, I guess he was really close to the Pope. And I was like, what do you mean close? She's like, well, he's standing like right next to him. It's like, well, he's not press. And it turned out they were photos from Al Barczewski, who was in charge of all the press credentials for the visit. But then he was the chief photographer for the Vatican for the visit. So he got to be right next to the Pope all day long.
The mother lode here.
Right.
It really was. And it was another one of those providential moments where I had to just stop and go, thank you.
Yeah. Never before seen will be in this documentary.
Those photos, I don't know if and where or when they've been published before. Some of them had the Vatican stamp on the back of them. But I was able to, they let me take them, scan them. They get the digital copies so that they're preserved forever. And then, I printed out a whole nother set to be able to do that effect. We had a slider move in the church, and Living History Farms was so good to us. They just said, just put everything back when you're done. And it really
probably from the Trove l'Osservatore Romano, the Vatican paper, that really handles a lot of the official photos for the Pope. You mentioned General Thompson, a figure unknown to me really until the documentary. His humanity comes through in an endearing way as well. As the days approach, he almost is giving the whole team a kind of spiritual pep talk, right? And not this barking orders or anything else, but trying to say, hey, folks, lighten up, don't let the stress claim you here.
I wish I could have put this in, and I ran out of time, but Marty Jorgensen talks about that everybody just kind of lined up behind the general, and they were marching with him for this event. And he said everything just kind of fell into place. And he just had this quiet command that carried the room perfectly.
Very self-effacing and all that he is about. Fresh interviews then with Monsignor Bagnato too.
Those
man, just the Energizer Bunny just keeps going on here.
That was a lot of fun, and I think he probably could have gone on quite a bit longer.
No,
but we had I know, right? But we had other interviews lined up, and we had to keep things moving. But he was so gracious with his time and with his energy and helping me when I had questions. It's the perspective. Everybody in that room thinking back to everything from logistics, like literally how would you shut down 2 interstates in this day and age? It's just incredible. Let's think about what the Holy Father was saying that day and the message about taking care of the land. And that's, we hear that all the time today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, very powerful. And gonna want to hear from you after the break here. Just, do you get to a point when all the footage and all this, I want to incorporate all of this.
A 14-hour documentary.
The pressure builds up. So,
yeah. Well, we are going to take a break, but stay with us as we continue our conversation with John Torpy, producer of the Pope's Visit to Iowa, commemorating the 45th anniversary of Pope John Paul II's visit to Iowa. It's premiering on Iowa Public Television October 7th at 8 p.m. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network. Welcome back to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen.
So thank you again for remaining with us, John Torpy. That show, the documentary, is going to broadcast on a public broadcasting system at 8 p.m. on Monday, October 7th. Monday, October 7th. So looking forward to that. I had the question out there about, in the creative process, you've assembled all this footage and everything else. Is it like, the snake that swallowed the gopher or something here?
There is so much. And that comes back to what I was talking about with making sure I tell the story right. And it becomes a collaborative process at one point, because you get so focused on the details and you want to make sure you get everything just right. But thankfully, we have so many talented people that were helping me with this project that, I had somebody go, this doesn't quite make sense. Let's change this a bit or change that. And it really, that collaborative process towards the end helps take the pressure off a little bit and make sure you've got the story right and you're focused. And I produced it, but it's really not me. There's a lot more people involved in getting this over the finish line.
What would be the total team to produce a documentary like this?
Oh my gosh, just from
rough number,
probably 20 to 30 people. You've got our awesome comms team. You've got all the work that happens towards the end of it, getting it over the finish line, but also getting the word out. It's like, hey, we've got this. And then, you've got all your educators that are going to take it and turn it into educational tools. And it just becomes this really great collaborative moment throughout the whole building. Just kind of the same way the Pope's visit was a collaborative moment with the city and everybody coming out to help support the visit of the Holy Father. I
mean, it is masterful, and also maybe a little nostalgia for me. In a matter of a couple of minutes in the beginning of the documentary, you kind of rehearse John Paul's life. Karol Wojtyła, the young man who eventually lands in Krakow, Poland. He goes to Jagiellonian University, seminary, priest, bishop, and then age 59, the Pope. That.
Well, he knew 12 languages. I barely master English. It was just incredible. Mm-hmm. I mean, the man was so brilliant, but so good with people.
Yeah, and so a year after being elected Pope, the death of John Paul I, and then the month of 2 popes, September 78, here he is coming to the United States, and the announcement. And so very short shrift here that everything had to come together.
And I think it's a testament to the community of Iowa, and David Oman speaks to it, how people came out. And Marty Jorgensen in the film mentions it too. It's like, yes, the Pope is coming, but look at the people. You've got these corporations that are just handing off their C-suite teams because they're like, yeah, you guys need organizational help. Sure. So much had to happen for the entire city to help this come together. And it was a pretty cool moment for Des Moines and a really cool moment for Iowa for sure.
And obviously the stately pastoral presence of Bishop Morris Dingman, again, his fervor, his prophetic way, but truly a shepherd in his own right, and how he was at the center of all this, a kind of oasis of peace, but bringing people along and kind of blessing them all the way through it.
And when you mention him, it also reminds me of Monsignor Bignano's quote in the documentary where he talks about how he should be anxious, he should be nervous, he should be worried about things, and he just wasn't. And that kind of reminds me of Bishop Dingman because he carried that same presence. It was that, okay, we're going to get this done, but there wasn't an anxiousness. There wasn't it was a peaceful moment and a holy moment. And
Which reminds me to pray more to Bishop Damon. Place your mantle around me, please, to allow me to know that same peace and that. So a masterful work that you've pulled together, the documentary, and obviously new projects awaiting you. Maybe things here that already you're at work on, but hopefully you can just bask in having delivered the baby here.
Yeah, it's nice. There's a little bit of a slowdown, but then we keep, on to the next thing, on to the next show.
Something to celebrate.
Well, this has been another edition of Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. Thank you to our guests and to all of our listeners in Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, or wherever you may be listening to the Iowa Catholic Radio Network and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network.
You can hear Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen every week on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by Sarah Vocations Ministry. Learn more at joinserra.org.